You just might be one of these people who has decided that they don't like crowds and that they are sensitive to noises. And then you've labeled it as a spiritually elevated form of consciousness, calling it empathy. I'm an empath, and you stay at home and you don't like crowds and you avoid conflict. It's more a sign of emotional dysregulation and the inability to integrate and process emotions. It's not a spiritual trait. What empathy is, it's the ability to put yourself in another person's shoes and understand their perspective and their way of views. Now, you might not want to agree with me, and that's okay. I'm not living my ego. It really doesn't matter. Your journey is your journey. But what I'm attempting to do here is awaken you to the fact that you might be overlooking a situation that's going on in your life, leading you into what we call the derp state. And so you don't want to be in that state, because in that state you suffer. And it's escaping the reality so that you don't have to suffer. But there is some things in there when you are avoidant that you're missing out the joys of life. And I know there's a part of you who's just dying to get out there and be seen, but now you just disassociated it and you don't want to be seen and you don't want to be in public. So it's more of a sign of trauma of why people think they're an empath and then think that they feel other people, when it's truthfully just projection of how they feel. And I see it often in my office. People come in and they're like, I'm an empath and, I feel other people and I do massages and I do this body work and I do this and I feel other people. I can't take it. No, it's more of a sign of emotional dysregulation. See, the Buddha realized this. And when he went into public, he didn't feel anything. He realized everyone's on their own journey, but it took him time to get to that point, because first he had to do amazing feats like walking on glass, sleeping on a bed of nails, getting in boiled cauldrons of hot water, and surviving. And he realized that wasn't the way to enlightenment. And so he thought the way to enlightenment was to go away from his family and go away from the kingdom and disappear in nature. Now, when he disappeared in nature and he meditated for these 30 days, he realized, I made a mistake. I left everybody that I cared about to find this enlightenment, to search for something, when the fastest way to enlightenment is to put yourself in situations that trigger you. So this is more of the situation of you're trying to escape the suffering that's within you by staying at home. And there's an actual physiological change that occurs when people are an empath. And that physiological change is more due to the EMFs that are not natural in our environment. So what happens is when we're exposed to non-native electromagnetic fields, dirty electricity, cell phone radiation, routers, 400 nanometer blue light from LEDs, from your cell phone, these non-native frequencies that lack infrared light. See, there's not necessarily anything wrong with the 400. It's the lack of the other spectrums. It's the void of those spectrums that are actually causing demyelination of your nerves, because they raise glutamate. They destroy the copper-ion redox reaction, and that raises histamine and glutamate. And then your nerves become demyelinated and you're oversensitive. See, being an empath is actually more of a health condition. It's actually demyelinated nerves, and autism is on that spectrum. So when we see a rise in autism, people love to blame the vaccines. And I'm not saying that heavy metals don't disrupt the DHFR gene and the COMT gene, right? I'm not saying that. Those mutations are real and they happen, but they happen because metals are a part of it. But the real reason is these non-native frequencies. That's a bigger reason for autism. And so these nerves become demyelinated. And when these nerves become demyelinated, become oversensitive to sounds, right? All your sensory nerves meet in the center of the brain in the thalamus. Your optic nerve, your auditory nerve, your olfactory nerve, all these senses meet right there in the center of your brain. And then you have sensory sensitivity. And you got to escape and you want to get away from it because it's like nails on a chalkboard. And so this is why people exclude themselves from society. And I'm not saying that you have to enjoy and love it. Like if your thing is you like to stay at home and read books and that's truthfully what you love doing, then great. But you should be able to put yourself in every social situation and never be uncomfortable. You should be able to adapt. You should be like the water element in Chinese medicine. You should be able to become a solid, a liquid, a gas, right? A plasma, right? You should be able to transform to any situation and be able to adapt and know how to handle it. And every challenging situation, the adversity actually develops you. It builds the prefrontal cortex in your personality. There's a part of your brain, the substantial Niagara, and that part of the brain grows and your personality develops when you do challenging things. So I argue that the empath has a very small substantia nigra. I will argue that to the death, and I know it's backed up by if we want to do an autopsy on bodies and then look at their personality. I guarantee you there's lack of self-development there, and they want to put themselves in hard situations. But the hard situations actually also develop the mitochondria. Mitochondrial biogenesis occurs when hard things are done, right? Cold plunges cause the mitochondria to adapt. Sometimes, depending on how much, it can actually be in a bad way. But hard environmental situations and exercise causes a mitochondria to adapt, to create mitochondrial density. So avoidance in the emotional state does the same thing. It doesn't matter if it's emotional, biochemical, structural. Any kind of stress will cause a mitochondria to adapt. Life is about survival. And if you resist the flow of life, you die because it stops the flow of electrons. So being an empath actually slows the flow of electrons, leading to chronic illness. And that derp state that you're in is actually causing health conditions because it's limiting the flow of energy through the meridians, right? So you got to understand that there's this whole system. Chakras, they feed into the meridians, and the meridians are connected to your emotions and connected to the organs and glands. So your DNA is like a semiconductor, and it's basically pulling in energy from the field all around us, the ethereal energy. It's pulling that energy in, and that feeds into the cell, and the cell is nothing more than a capacitor. The mitochondria is just an engine, and it's driving those electrons. So when you escape and you use being an empath and disguise that as a spiritual trait, and it's not trauma, it's everyone else. You can see this is just projection of your own doing so that you don't have to face the self. Ego gets in the way. And then you got a health issue and you don't think, well, there must be something outside me. I need to go to centralized medicine. But centralized medicine tells us sunlight causes cancer. But when they did these studies, they did it in a container. They did it in an environment mixed with other non-native lights and magnetic frequencies, and they only tested one spectrum of UV light. They didn't test the whole thing, and they said, oh, the radiation causes cancer, but there was void of infrared light, and it had fluorescent lighting in the lab. And they did it on nocturnal animals. You're diurnal. But yet you want to run to the drugs and the vaccines and, centralized studies to back up your data. Now, you can think that I'm freaking nuts, and I'm cool with that. I'd rather appear strange to others than be a stranger to myself, but I have the ability to critically think. And I can also put myself into any social situation or anything and never feel uncomfortable. I may not agree with you, but I can still love you. And I don't get offended. I don't have to go to my hole and sit at home because I think that people are nuts. I can face the demons. I can walk into the valley of the shadow of death and have no fear and talk to anybody and understand their perspective. I may not take it on because I realize that it's a thought virus and they've been programmed by society because DARPA and the DOD and all these other departments have gotten into their head and brainwashed them, and they don't realize that real science was backed and done in the 1800s. It was taken out of the books so that corporations could just make money. because there's money in sickness, not money in health. But yet you want to run all the external things and try to make you better. And there is not a difference between you saying that and then doing dumb things like taking methylene blue through an IV when 90% of it is absorbed in the small intestines. There's zero reason for it. Methylene blue helps mitochondria move, right? It gets rid of reductive stress. And mixed with red light, there's been some actual patents from Pfizer that say that it could possibly treat cancer. And they had done some research on it. But I'm not saying that's the solution. There's other factors, right? I've always said it's the 7 factors of water, food, rest, exercise, mind, environment, and posture, right? It's all those factors. But, realistically, we are a spiritual being having a human experience. And you can't sit at home and just say, I'm an empath and I feel too much for other people. It's painful to see, because that's just projection. You need to not make excuses. You need to learn social skills. You need to actually go out and practice. You should be able to go in every situation. Talk to anybody, right? People who are successful cultivate relationships. So you have to go out in public and meet people. You have to deal with the public and understand they're going to have different viewpoints. And you can express yourself, and some people are going to listen, some aren't. Some are just going to be indoctrinated. You got to understand the non-native frequencies that are out there right now, as far as 5G, the nanometer wavelength, and then you got millimeter wavelength with the people with the Bluetooth in their ears, and then they're watching TVs that are putting out 400 nanometer wavelength light. They're not getting any natural light. They're all indoors. They're in hustle culture, right? It demyelinates the nerves. It causes sensory sensitivity. But yet we're saying that I'm just spiritually evolved. I'm an empath. So we don't have to face the problem at hand. And the real answer is to connect with nature, connect with God, get the infrared light, receive that from the plants. It amplifies the light by 3,000%. And that drives the electrons to the mitochondria. It builds strong synapses in your brain. And now you're in mind-heart coherence. And wow, you have clear thought. And you can realize that people will judge you, but you don't care. There's enough love within inside you that you can give it to them and have compassion and understand where they're coming from. But realize at the same time, you must protect yourself, because control is not love, right? And so when someone's trying to force you to do something, there is no love. It's the void. It's the absence of love. And that's when we run into problems, is when someone tries to harm you in a way that you know is not good for you. And that's when you have to put your boundaries up. And that's when it gets all in the gray area. And it's like, what's good, what's bad, but realistically, the deal is that control is a form of bondage, and bondage leads to suffering. Control is not a form of love. Understanding is, and you can have different points of view. That's okay. Just you can try to get your point across. Not everybody's going to listen to you. And personally, let's face it, the people that cannot communicate, and are these empaths, they're usually going to be the people that vote in socialist regimes. They're usually going to be the people that rely on centralized healthcare. They're usually going to be the people with the most health issues, right? They need someone to take care of them. And that's because they are projecting their issues. They want daddy to help them. They want someone outside of them to come and save the day. And it's done by design. It's all done by design, because a docile, obedient person is easy to control and serve an elite class. But understand that at the same time, you don't have to stoop to their level. It's one person that lights a torch and makes the change. So what I want everyone to do is realize the spiritual trait of empathy, and being an empath and labeling yourself that because you feel other people and you're sensitive to public and being in public is not an excuse. It's an avoidant. You're a non-divergent avoidant. And you have to acknowledge this. And that's when the soul really develops, and when the soul truthfully grows. You have to put yourself in these hard situations and challenge yourself to develop yourself. You have mirror neurons, but you also can be the cause and not the effect. So if you're the cause and you don't have these mirror neurons activated by everybody else, you are activating everyone else's mirror neurons. That's why I say when you light the torch, you allow other people to change. You teach people personal accountability and responsibility. You show people there's maybe a different path because as you believe in yourself, other people just believe in you. But we're taught you need to cultivate these ideas from everywhere else and then develop your own personality and your own beliefs from what other people think. But why can't you have your own thought and influence other people? And I'm not saying be ignorant to data and research and what's true, but you have to pay attention to who's doing the research. Why is it being done? What if we change some of these variables in the study? What if we change those variables? What really happens, right? And so everybody wants to look at epidemiological studies, but there's other factors in there with light, and you can't control these people for long periods of time, so you have no idea what other bad habits they had. Can we really trust it? I mean, that's what they do with the blue zones. It's a horrible study. They say that you need interaction with people in order to thrive, in order to live a long life, in order to be happy. But do you? This just goes back to you should be able to thrive in every situation. I would encourage you that if you want to really grow as an individual, not to avoid situations and make excuses for situations. If you want something and you have this desire in your heart, decide how you're going to get it. And you're not going to become wealthy if you just sit at home, unless you become this day trader. But still, you're going to have to cultivate relationships and learn from other people that are already doing it. Look, you have to realize you're going to have to do the things that you don't like to do. End of story. You're just going to have to do the things that you don't like doing. And then eventually what happens is the prefrontal cortex changes your personality and becomes a habit that you actually do love doing because you challenged yourself and you learned it and you got good at it. You were worried about being a failure, but now you're good at it. So because you're good at it, now you love it. And the real reason you didn't like doing it before is because you weren't very good at it. Nobody gets good at things by doing it once, right? It's repetitive, right? The tipping point says you have to do things for 100 hours to become proficient. And I think it's more than that. I think it's way longer than 100 hours because there's more nuances down the road that just keep popping up and you just keep getting better and learning more and more and more. Every day, I make it a habit to learn a new word, to read some chapter of a book, to put myself in situations that challenge me. Every single day, I'm doing something to evolve or to grow. I don't just say I'm an empath. Oh, it's just hopeless, right? You got to realize your cells are vibrating on a frequency. And when you go into these states of labeling yourself and projecting the world to the world that they're the problem and not you, remember, you are not the hero in your story. You are the villain. And the reason you're the villain is because you're self-sabotaging everything in your life. You can't control other people, but you can control yourself. So when things are actually showing you, when the world is showing you something, you can change that. You can change your perspective on it. And so through that, you take the power back, and that's when real change happens in your life. Because you took accountability about it, and you did the hard things, and didn't say, I'm an empath, and I'm going to stay at home and just escape. So now you're going to have to learn that storytelling is what builds trust. It releases oxytocin in other people. And through that, then, you cultivate change. That is the key, is learning how to connect with others, to hold your vibration high. Since your cells vibrate on a certain frequency, it's all a reflection of your subconscious mind, which is 98% of your thought. And it's the beliefs cultivated, and you just sitting at home saying you're not depressed, saying you're just an empath and you can't stand the public and you can't stand noises, you're not addressing the real problem. The real problem is you have demyelinated nerves, copper iron redox, and emotional dysregulation. And then once you face that and you embrace the hard or embrace the suck, and you get good at the things that you have challenges with, that's when your life really changes. And that's when your heart opens up and the mass-free energy that exists in the universe is changed. And the free-flowing energy that moves through your mitochondria is unrestricted. And you achieve health like you never thought possible.